Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I do Monday through Friday on this here YouTube channel. And Fridays are a very special day at The Cult because Fridays are when we do happy hour. I mean, what better thing to do on a Friday afternoon than to watch a woke training from start to finish, and maybe have a couple of drinks and talk about it. And so that is exactly what we do here. We are going to watch a woke training from beginning to end. We watch the boring bits, we watch the cringy bits. And because at least once a week, we sit down and we watch an entire woke training, every single part of it. I truly believe that people who attend happy hour and then, of course, Socialism Saturdays on the channel do know more about what is going on the woke left than, well, anyone else on the planet. It is a sad state of affairs, but it is true, because most people are learning, quote unquote learning. Why do I have hair looking stupid under my hat? There we go. It's going to bother me. Most people are learning about the woke left based on TikTok videos or based on clips cut out of context. And well, those things can be insightful for a short, quick hit. If you really want to know what the woke left is up to, you sit your butt down and you watch them, because they put all their stuff on the internet. And so today, guys, a couple weeks ago, we watched Queer Theology. And then, because the Queer Theology training that we watched was so crazy, I was able to write up this here Substack article about it because it was crazy. And if we find one thing that's crazy, we can't just leave well enough alone. We have to go watch other things that are crazy too. And so to complement our Queer Theology training, which you can find if you missed it over on my Substack, Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com, if you have not yet joined, I found another one. You're welcome. I really was not feeling well yesterday. And by the way, I'm still not feeling great today. Don't get it twisted. I'm gonna drink and stuff. But I don't know what the hell I ate. Or like what 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 smote me from on high, but my stomach was not feeling too great. I basically spent most of yesterday in bed. So I'm sorry if I haven't been producing the content that you guys wanted over the last couple days. I spent most of yesterday in bed sleeping. It was awesome. But while I was in bed, I may not have been sitting at my computer. I may not have had all of my devices available to me. I may have not really been all that lucid. But what I did have was my phone. And of course, just because I'm laying in bed sick doesn't mean I'm not on the internet at all. I mean, come on. So I took the opportunity to do a little bit of research, and I happened to come across this presentation that was posted on the YouTube channel of the Episcopal Diocese of Arizona yesterday. Now, in the description, they're claiming that this presentation happened tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't yesterday. It was 2 days ago on July 12th. They're claiming that it happened tomorrow, but no, this presentation was really on July 12th, not too long ago. The Episcopal Diocese of Arizona. The Reverend Dr. Charlie Bell spoke at Trinity Episcopal Cathedral in Phoenix, Arizona at their July Lunch and Learn session. And the session that Reverend Dr. Charlie Bell gave is called Beyond Tolerance and Inclusion: The Future of Queer Holiness. Make all the cracks you want. The future of queer holiness in the church. So last time we did queer theology, it came from the land of the North. It came from Canada. And I think we can all agree that Canada is, well, more woke than we are by quite a bit, actually. And so but it's easy when we're watching stuff from Canada, right? It's easy to go, this is in Canada. We don't have to deal with this. Oh, no, 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 not according to the Episcopal Diocese of Arizona. We do indeed have to deal with this. Terry, thank you for the super chat. Terry did not like them, or did not mount the like button. The like button mounted him. Well, sometimes that like button does get a little bit out of control, Terry. It is the way it is, but I do appreciate the super chat. So the description for this is: Father Bell is a priest and a doctor practicing as an academic psychiatrist at King's College London and Maudsley Hospital in South London. Oh, good. He is also the current curate of St. John the Divine, Kennington, in the Diocese of Southwark in South London. He has written about both medicine and theology and the intersection of the two. He is the author of Queer Holiness: The Gift of LGBTQI People to the Church, which calls for a sea change in the way the Church of England talks with and about LGBTQI people. So, I do want to warn everyone that the sound in this presentation is a little janky. It is. And I'm not sure if they fix it in the presentation because I didn't watch that much. I just watched enough to know that the sound is a little bit janky. So we're going to try with the sound. We're going to try our very best. I'm going to turn on captions. We're going to try our best because this was just presented in Arizona. And I always, of course, as you guys like to know, I like to see what's actually presented. And sometimes, because the woke left sucks at technology, we have to deal with sound issues, and it's just the way it goes. However, if the sound gets too janky for us, that's all right, because this guy's been all over the damn internet talking about what he believes. So we can watch this guy on other YouTube channels, hopefully with better sound. Here we go. Queer Holiness with Reverend Charlie Bell. There we go. Another one right there. Probably the same presentation. So if the sound doesn't work out with this one, we have other options, okay? Everyday Therapist is asking for bingo. That is a really good point, Everyday Therapist. Let me just get that bingo card up real quick. We, of course, will be playing gender queer bingo today in the chat. Let me grab that link. Doo-doo-doo. Pop it in the chat over on YouTube. I will also pop it in the chat over on Rumble. Thank you to everyone who's watching on Rumble right now. I do appreciate it. And of course, Odyssey, Rockfin, Twitter, Getter. Where else you guys might be watching me? I do appreciate it. All right. So how bingo works is, of course, you grab your card, then we click generate card. You get a free square in the middle, and then we're going for lines, or we're going for corners. Check off a word every time you get one on your bingo card, which is unique to you. Let us know if you get chat in the bingo, or chat in the bingo in the chat. You guys have to excuse me. I'm under the weather. It is what it is. I'm doing my best. All right. Let us know when you got a bingo in the chat. We will congratulate you. You won't win anything except a round of applause from your fellow comrades in the chat. And then once we get bingo, we are headed for blackout bingo after that. So please make sure you're participating there. Also, of course, please do make sure you are subscribed to my Substack. I had big plans for my Substack this week. My stomach had other plans. I'm sorry. There's a whole bunch of stuff I want to publish that I just haven't finished yet, and I'm going to be publishing it. I do apologize for taking a couple extra days, but I know you guys forgive me because I don't get sick that often, but when I do get sick, I get sick. So please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack if it's not already. Yes, I am hopeful, Brian, that, beer is a magical gift from God. And I do hope that maybe having a beer or two will help. It has in the past. I mean, listen, the hair of the dog is a real thing. So when I've been hungover in the past, drinking a beer has definitely helped me feel better. I don't understand why it can't work this time, even though I'm not hungover or anything. But we'll give it a try. We'll see how it goes. We're still going to do that. But guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing, you can sign up on the Substack, $5 a month, $50 a year. If you want to become a paid supporter, when you become a paid supporter on the Substack, you do get access to a variety of perks, to include the supporter Discord, in which we have movie night every Sunday at 8 p.m. This week's movie is MASH. I have never seen MASH, but it was voted on by my locals community. It is Patriotic Movie Month, and so I guess we will be watching MASH in the supporter Discord on Sunday at 8 p.m., which you can get access to through the Substack, through my locals, through my Patreon, or by becoming a member on this here YouTube channel, whatever works best for you. But if I had to make a recommendation, it would be to join the Substack, because that is where I'm posting my very best content, the most unique unwoke content on all of the internet. I am breaking down the woke ideology for you, letting you know what's really going on in the world, explaining it from a very beginner's level, because no one ever explained this stuff to me. I had to figure it out on my own, and now I'm downloading all the knowledge I have to you on the Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. Queen Beth of the chat says, I gotta say, Carlin, after listening to Vivek speak, and basically everyone and their mother has corrected me on the pronunciation of his name, so I will do my best. I've been calling him Vivek in my head for 2 years, so you guys will have to forgive me if I don't get the pronunciation on the name right all the time. But after listening to Vivek speak today, I'm shocked you like him. He's very conservative. Well, you know what, Beth? I like smart, reasonable people. I don't dislike conservatives. I dislike conservatives when conservatives are pushing gay hating bullshit, when conservatives are telling people to get the F out of their movement, when conservatives are insulting people for their weight and their haircut, when conservatives are doing everything in the world to lose the election and thus doom all of us to the leftist socialism that I think is almost inevitable. That is when I hate conservatives. But Vivek, whatever, however we're pronouncing his name today, he is a smart, capable, reasonable person that is not doing the gay hating bullshit, that is not damning everyone that disagrees with him, that is not making fun of people for their weight or their haircut, and wouldn't you damn well know it, he actually seems to want to win an election. Holy shit, what a time to be alive. So yes, I do appreciate him very much. I think everyone should check him out. And welcome to any new people who might be on my channel from the video that I posted about him while I was out sick yesterday. I hope that I've been getting some great feedback on that video, actually, and I'm pretty happy about it. Vivek actually cares about people and this country. Yes, he does. Well, just because there are weird haircuts doesn't mean you need to make fun of people for their haircut or judge people based on their haircut. And if you do that, don't be surprised when those people don't vote for you. I don't know why this is so hard for conservatives to understand. I really don't. If you rag on people for their looks, they're not going to vote for you. No, he's not going to be Trump's VP choice. Carrie Lake is going to be Trump's VP choice. There is no way in this universe Vivek is going to be Trump's VP choice. It's going to be Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake's doing an event with Trump right now. Trump's going to want to pick a woman. Mark my words, Trump is not going to make the smart choice. Trump is the worst hirer in the history of hirers. Anyway, we will talk about that another time because we got orders of business to get down to. Not only do we have to watch this presentation, but you guys need to help me pick out a beer because even though I'm not feeling great, it's in the spirit of happy hour. I'm taking one for the team, for all of you. Let me show you what I just bought, all right? All right. So let's see. What do we have today? I tried to get some beers. We're tempering it down a little bit for today. There's no Imperials or anything. First one we have on the docket. So the spirit of happy hour, guys, for those of you who are new here, is I really do drink during happy hour, and I like craft beer, and I like telling you about craft beer. And you should all go try craft beer if you're just looking for something to replace your Bud Light. You should never have been drinking Bud Light in the first place. There are so many great beers out there. I got 4 beers that I've got on my selection. You guys get to vote on which one I drink first. I will not be drinking all 4 beers on stream, but we can enjoy learning about them and stuff like that. The first one I have is Old Outhouse Ales, and this is a cherry saison. I do like cherries in beer quite a bit, actually. I'm not normally a cherry person in real life, but you put cherries in a beer, man, so good, so good. Kevin, you're not going to bring that shit on my stream, bro. No, not allowed. Time out for you right now. Don't do that shit. There will be no gay-hating bullshit on this stream. I don't know how I have to make myself more clear. Conservatives, that is not welcome here. If you bring that gay-hating bullshit into my stream, first you're going to get a warning, you're going to get timed out, next time you're going to be banned. It's entirely up to you. If you want to hate the gays, you are welcome to do it any other place on the internet. You're not doing it here. Fuck off with that. Anyway, I like cherries in beer. It's really good. One of my favorite beers is Sam Adams Cherry Wheat. That's a great summer beer, but this is going to be a cherry saison, so it's going to be a little bit lighter than your typical kind of like ale, because saisons are Belgians. They have a lot of depth to their flavor. They're really good. Let's see. What do I have next? Dragon Water says, just because, have a great day. Thank you, Dragon Water. I do appreciate that. How very kind. I also have cherry in this beer, but this is called Charms and Hexes. Very pretty can. And this is going to be key lime and cherry, and this is going to be a sour ale. So this is going to be a lot more sour than our saison, this is probably just going to have like a hint of cherry because it's more of a saison. This is going to be more of like a fruity beer because it's a sour. Let me see if there's a description of some sort. 2-row malt, white wheat, hops, key lime, cherry, Saco river water, and yeast. So key lime and cherry. Cheers for that. Next up, we got some blueberry. I love blueberry beer as well. Blueberry beer is great. My favorite blueberry beer is Wachusett Blueberry from Western Massachusetts. They do a great blueberry ale. If you're in the New England area, you might be able to get it at like a supermarket or something because they do produce a mass market. But I first had it actually at the ski area in Wachusett where they were doing a brew festival, and it was really, really great. Sadly, this is not Wachusett Blueberry today. This is called Lollipop Forest, and look at how pretty that blue can is. Another pretty can. This is a sour ale with milk, sugar, and wild blueberry. Let's see, where is this from? Newmarket, New Hampshire. And that's all it is. Blueberry sour. Going to be delicious. And then our last one is not like the other. This is going to be a coconut almond porter. Now, Stouts and porters tend to be my favorite beers. Stouts more so than porters, but porters can be like a good like companion or like substitute if there's no good stouts on tap. But I'll tell you this, if you've never had a coconut stouts are incredible. Now this is a porter, so it's not going to be quite as rich as a stout, but it's still going to be really good. This is from Baxter Brewing Company. It's called Window Seat. Ale with natural coconut and almond flavors. We couldn't resist the chance to bring back this Baxter favorite in a new way. Relax, take a sip of this decadent porter, and embrace the island way of life full of chocolate flavors and brewed with medium toasted coconut and almond meal. This award-winning beer is the tropical vacation you deserve. I think I definitely deserve a tropical vacation. Does anyone else feel like they deserve a tropical vacation? I'm just saying. All right, guys, so those are our choices for our beer today. Again, we got cherry saison, which is going to be probably more of like an ale with like a hint of cherry. We have got Choms and Hexes, sour ale, key lime, and cherry, not to be confused with the first cherry. We have our Lollipop Forest in the beautiful blue can, wild blueberries and milk lactose. And then we've got our Tropical Vacation, coconut and almond porter. And that's going to be our last selection for today. Go ahead and put that poll in the chat. You guys can vote. Let me know which one you want me to drink. I will enjoy all of them at some point, but probably not all today because that might be problematic for me. I haven't even eaten yet today. This is going to go real well. I'll tell you that right now. All right. While you guys are voting in that poll, there we go. Let me get the sound set up here. God. Being sick is the worst. It is. Everything is off about everything. Gosh. All right, guys, get those votes in there. I'm actually surprised at which one is winning right now. I did not expect that. All right, we are closing the poll in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wow, a tie. It was a tie, I think. Where are my results? It was a tie, so the choice goes to me, and I'm going to pick the blueberry one. I'm picking Lollipop Forest. I was actually surprised the key lime and cherry sour got as many votes as it did. I was really surprised about that, but we'll do that one later, or maybe tomorrow. We'll drink it at some point. So runoff goes to me. I get to pick, and I'm picking the blueberry. Now let's see. Let's see if this is a pretty blueberry or a bot. You're gonna die. Hang on. Let me get this big screen so you guys can see how pretty this beer is. Bot is gonna fucking lose it. Hang on. Oh, we got purple drank on the stream today. That is about the prettiest beer that I've ever seen in my life. Cheers, everyone. Happy Friday. We made it through another week. That is effing good. Let me tell you that. That is good. This is from Decidius Brewing Company. It's in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Lollipop Forest. Cheers to you, Decidius Brewing Company. All right, guys. Let's get this party started. We got our drinks. Now we got to get our entertainment. We are watching Beyond Tolerance and Inclusion, the future of queer holiness in the church. And again, I'm just going to warn people, the sound is a little janky. If we're going to give it a try, but if the sound really doesn't work on this one, we're going to find something else by this same guy to watch because there's plenty of options. But this was this was 2 days ago in the Episcopal Church in Arizona. And you can actually see it is posted on the YouTube channel of the Episcopal Diocese of Arizona. And we're going to try to manage with the sound and we'll see how it goes. All right, everyone, hang in there. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out. All right.
Activating the stomach. So it's been raining for about 5 days. So it's lovely to be reminded what the sun looks like. And it's great to be in the Episcopal Church. I was just saying to a few people during when I was going around the tables, my church, Church England, is currently in the middle of its General Synod, which is essentially like General Convention, but a bit more bumpy. And we meet twice a year, and we're in the middle of that now. And that is very important in my role as a priest. So
I'm going to fast forward a little bit, see if we can actually get this to better.
Get some halls, you get the coronation, you get all of that kind of stuff going on. The Diocese of Surrey is where the real deal is, where proper ministry is taking place. The Diocese of London, we're not agreeing about, of course. But we're a diocese which has a range of those of you who are interested, the book covers a little bit of information on the English situation.
This sound is really something else, isn't it?
So it's found it's not possible as well. It's Matthew Potter's asked a question about trying to trick him about divorce. It's about you heterosexuals, by the way. It's not.
All right, I've just made a fucking executive decision. I'm sorry. I should have looked better into the sound of this video. I thought it was something that was going to clear up after a few minutes, but it does seem like it is going to be this way the entire effing video.
Into the centre. Moving away from that being the normative.
Yeah, we're not watching this video. Okay. Sorry guys, we're gonna find something else from the Reverend Dr. Charlie Bell. It's just too bad. It's too bad. I thought maybe it was gonna be better when I put the headphones on. I thought maybe it was gonna be better when I put the captions on, but it just wasn't, and so we got to do something else. That's all right. Let's see. Charlie Bell, Queer Holiness. An evening. Hang on. There's plenty to choose from. Yeah, we couldn't understand him. It's unwatchable. I thought it was going to be better. That's all right. We're going to find something good. He's doing a little tour, isn't he? How about this one? Also in the Episcopal Church in Roanoke, Virginia. Okay. Oh, you guys can't see what I see. Duh. How about this one? An Evening with Charlie Bell, academic psychiatrist, priest in the Church of England, and author of Queer Holiness, except it's in the Episcopal Church in Roanoke, Virginia.
Hello, and happy Pride Month to you all. My name is Kristen Tadlock Bell, and I currently serve as the senior.
So this was not too long ago. This was like a month ago. This was less than a month ago. So basically what I think is probably happening is this guy is doing a tour around Episcopal churches in the United States. And so like it's going to be basically the same effing content. So but we're actually going to be able to hear it and understand it. So yay, we made it. All right.
Warden of Christ Episcopal Church in Roanoke. Christ Church is a believe out loud community. Our rector, Alexander McPhail, explained more of what that really means in another video on this YouTube channel, and I invite you to take a look at that. Celebrating LGBTQ pride is an act of resistance. This year, it feels particularly so in the Roanoke Valley, across the country, and abroad. 2023 has already been a record-breaking year for anti-LGBTQI legislation. Pride events across the country face cancellation and threats of violence. Just recently, members of our own community in Roanoke have been publicly and falsely accused of being child molesters and sexual predators. So much of this hate and discrimination is often promoted.
Hang on, I want to stop on that for a second. So this person has just said so many people that we love have been falsely accused of being child molesters, essentially. And you know what, guys? She's right. She's right. You know, the self-righteousness that conservatives have over so many of them being accused of being racist when they're not racist is now exactly the same self-righteousness that the left has over being accused of being pedophiles and child molesters when they're not pedophiles and child molesters. Because the conservative right is using the term groomer in exactly the same way as the left is using the term racist. And the only crime that you need to commit to be called a groomer or a pedophile by the conservative right, and I know this because they do this to me literally on a daily basis, is to say you should really stop calling people groomers and pedophiles when they're not groomers and pedophiles. And I promise you, if you do this, the response that you will get, at least on the hellscape that is Twitter, is, you support groomers and pedophiles. You must be one of them. You must be just as bad as them. You obviously believe that it's okay to do this to children. So when she says that people in their congregation have been falsely accused of these horrible things, she's absolutely correct. It shouldn't be happening. Conservatives are doing this to them damn selves. And if anyone says to me, but the left does it all the time, why does the left get to do it? The left does it all the time. Okay, so you're saying you're no better than the left? So you're saying you're no different than them? So you're saying that it's okay for you to do something that you told them not to do and that you were pissed off when they did it, but now you're doing exactly the same thing and you think it's somehow okay? Do you have any principles at all? If it's not good for one, it's not good for the other, and it is completely unacceptable in my like, grooming is a real problem. It's a real thing. It's a real problem. And every time one of you idiots takes the word groomer and you just hurl it around like it means nothing, you go, well, do you support this? You must support the sexualization of children. You must be a pedophile. Everyone keep their kids away from you. Every single time you do that shit, you prove that you're no better than the left, and you also diminish the value of the term groomer to begin with, to the point now where the term groomer means absolutely nothing. It means nothing. I've questioned if I should even keep using it to describe actual grooming, because the conservative right has overused it to the point where it means nothing and it makes you look like an unhinged lunatic every single time you use it. This is why we can't have nice things. They always get ruined. Anyway, let's continue.
In the name of God. It's so important for people of faith to challenge this spiritual violence and offer safety and solidarity to the queer community, not just during Pride, but every day. As part of our Pride celebrations at Christ Church, we had the distinct privilege of welcoming the Reverend Dr. Charlie Bell as he began his U.S. book tour.
U.S. book tour.
Due
what
to
did
a
I say?
technical glitch, our recording of the June 6th evening event did not begin until about 20 minutes into the program. But here's what you missed at the beginning. Father Charlie Bell is a priest and a physician. He practices as an academic psychiatrist at the Maudsley Hospital in South London. He is a fellow in medicine at Girton College in the University of Cambridge. And he is currently serving as priest to the community of St. John the Divine, Kennington, in the Diocese of Southwark in South London.
Leftists suck at technology. They're the worst.
Medicine and theology and the intersection between the two. And he is the author of the book that we chose as our June book study, Queer Holiness.
Oh, they read
the
his
gift
book in
of
book club. Oh, that's nice
LGBTQI
of them.
people to the church. In Queer Holiness, Father Bell calls for a sea change in the way that we talk about and with LGBTQI people in the church. He also has 2 forthcoming books on the concept of unity in the Anglican Communion and the contribution of queer people in the life of the church. Charlie Bell argues that to reject the overwhelming scientific and experiential knowledge about LGBTQIA people is no longer a valid position to hold, theologically or otherwise. His perspective is grounded in his work as a psychiatrist and a priest.
Oh, a
Covering
psychiatrist.
biology,
Excellent.
theology, psychology, reason, scripture. For our evening with Father Bell, we chose an interview format. Our interviewer is Todd Null. During the first segment, Todd explores the story of queer folk in the UK and the Church of England, as well as Charlie's own lived experience as queer, physician, priest. The second segment addresses the differences between the Church of England and the Episcopal Church in the US, and what we may be able to learn from each other as we move forward. And finally, the last segment, we open the floor to the questions from the audience. It was a very special evening, and we are so grateful to Father Bell for making time in this very busy schedule he had during his book tour to come to our little town of Roanoke in the Southwest Virginia mountains. Whatever may have led you to this YouTube channel, and this event in particular, we want you to know that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter your faith journey, or maybe none at all, you are beloved. You belong, just as you are, made in the divine image of God. And we're glad you stopped by. And now, here is
Autumn, I don't want to hear arguing about religion in the chat the entire effing time. People are allowed to believe what they believe. It's a tired argument, Autumn, and we want to pay attention to the presentation. And if you're distracting people by criticizing their religion, I'm gonna keep muting you, to be honest, because I'm not in the fucking mood today. Okay, you've made your point. You've said what you wanted to say. You disagree with religion. We all fucking get it. I don't like Christianity, but I'm not going to be debunking every single part of Christianity as we're going through this, because that's not the point of the stream. So just fucking relax.
Father Bell.
I go into this in the book a bit in terms of the science, but in brief, intersex people exist. People who have people who have a mixture of genetic background that will, for example, have different sex organs, whether internal or external, and so on. So it's male and female is not the only thing that exists in the human kingdom, let alone the animal kingdom, because of course in the animal kingdom there is not only is it not just X, Y, the kind of classic way that we think about genetics, but also there's the ability to change sex and various other things. So we know that male and female who created them is factually inaccurate if we're approaching it from that prescriptive perspective. But then we also need to read the scripture in the light of the rest of scripture. So what do we think that phrase means? And we often hear it taken out of context. We just hear that. Male and female he created.
We will spend time on my channel doing whatever the fuck I want to do, and I don't want to be arguing about the finer points of Christianity right now, because that is not the point of the stream. If you want to go to some atheist channel, go watch some Richard Dawkins, man, I don't begrudge it. You can go pick apart the fucking merits of Christianity on some atheist channel and have a grand old time with it. I don't want to see it in the fucking chat. That's not the point of the stream today.
created them, therefore. Well, what the total verse says, I think the little bit surrounding it as well, says God created humankind in God's own image. In the image and likeness of God, he created them, or in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them, full stop. Which to me reads much more like God didn't just create male in God's own image, and God didn't just create female in God's own image. So I think the first thing the passage is saying to us is, don't try and privilege one group of people over another, because they're all created in the image and likeness of God. That would be my first take home. And the second is that when you're using those pairs of words throughout Scripture, you see things like Alpha and Omega. You see day and night, and the end. It goes on and on and on. That doesn't mean that everything in between is ignored. And it doesn't mean that you are being prescriptive. You're not saying that those are the only two things that can exist. What you're saying is you're using Genesis as a descriptive text. You're saying this is describing what exists. So male and female are both forms of description and everything in between. So for me, the key take home of male and female, he created them, is that he created them in the image and likeness of God. The same is true for me for marriage in many ways. We're having constant debates about what marriage is. And I keep being told, well, the key thing about marriage is that it's male and female, it's man and woman. And I'm like, I think there's probably other key things about marriage which are more important than that, actually. But the more and more we move to a very prescriptive reading of Scripture.
I actually don't disagree with what he's saying there, but I want to take the super chat from Mark. Don't dismiss the term groomer. When and where it happens, it's a terrible problem. It starts so subtly that increasingly sexualizes the child. Well, the problem is, Mark, is that I'm not the one who dismissed the term groomer. I'm the one that wanted to be a responsible adult and actually use the term groomer to describe actual grooming. The problem is, it seems as though the entirety of the conservative right did not want to be responsible about that term. The entirety of the conservative right, and pretty much every fucking major influencer on the conservative right, wanted to use the term groomer to describe someone who politically disagrees with them, or quite frankly, anyone that says, do you want to stop overusing the term groomer when you're using it for stuff that isn't actually grooming? The entirety of the conservative right seemed to want to sling it as a slur against anyone that questioned them about anything, against anyone that didn't fucking overtly hate gay people, against anyone that wasn't religious, against anyone that didn't have a problem with private drag events, because guess what? No one had to fucking go to them in the first place. I'm not the one who dismissed the term groomer. The entirety of the conservative right dismissed the term groomer, and then in their overuse of the term groomer to attack their political enemies rather than actually identifying the problem, they were the ones that completely devalued the term. They were the ones that completely devalued it. I didn't do that. So now, anytime I use the term groomer, what happens is I hear from people that I'm a conspiracy theorist about all of this bullshit, and no, it's not really happening. You're just making it up. Now, the reason that's happening is because the right is overusing the term groomer to the point where they've made it fucking meaningless. People don't even know what it means anymore. I wish that hadn't happened, but there's nothing I can do about it because that's what they want to do.
The more and more we determine what Scripture means.
Just so people know, if the argument that I hear when I say something about conservatives that you don't like to hear, and the argument that you make is stop generalizing about conservatives, Carlin, it's not all conservatives, I didn't do that, and just stop generalizing. If you want to make that argument, I'm going to block you. This is not the day to fucking test me, guys. I'm going to be honest. I was in bed all fucking day yesterday, not feeling well. This is not the day to test my boundaries with your bullshit. It's not. When I see the entirety of the conservative right completely abusing a term that was supposed to describe a real and factual problem to the point where they now make it fucking impossible to actually describe a real problem because they have so overused the term. I'm going to say it. And if that gets your feelings in a bunch, then what I'm going to suggest is you take it up with the people on the conservative right that have actually bastardized this term to the point where they've made it meaningless. You're not going to take it up with me. You're going to take it up with the people who caused the problem in the first place. I don't want to hear it. Facts don't care about your fucking feelings.
Through a particular lens, the more and more difficult it becomes for that scripture to be life-giving to everybody. Ask someone who's trans, ask someone who's non-binary, ask someone who is intersex what that line means to them and listen to them. And that, for me, is how we should be doing our theology, rather than starting from a position where we decide what it means and tell other people how it impacts their life.
Thank you. We are not going to spend the evening doing biblical exegesis, although it could be entertaining to do so. But I appreciate you sharing that example. I think it's very illustrative of some of the arguments that you make in the book. I'm curious what your hope for the book is. What do you hope it adds to the larger dialogue we're having right now?
I hope it becomes obsolete, and bits of it are becoming obsolete. And I'm glad to. I don't think much of that's to do with the book. It's probably just to do with other people making these points in places where they're listened to. But that was the purpose of writing this thing, in a sense, was to say, look at this situation. It's a disaster. I mean, the middle section of this book does not read like a happiness charter. I mean, this is what happens when you create a church like this. And for me, holding people to account and saying, don't say no one's told you. You know, when people say, well, this is a terrible situation, or something, yeah, yes, I know, we've been talking about it. So for me, it's about holding people to account. It's about laying out arguments logically. It's written in a relatively persuasive style, but I don't think it's written in a terribly emotive style. I think it's written in a way to try and convince people. And I think some of that's working, whether it's the book or not. It's not the last word on sexuality and gender. It definitely isn't. It's not my last word on sexuality and gender. There's another one on its way. But the purpose of this is to change things, because at the moment it's iniquitous what my church is doing to people like me. And that's got to change. And if I can do something, then it's worth doing.
Well, what is his church doing to people like him? Because it seems to me that he's a priest in the Church of England. He's written a book. He's on a book tour around the United States, shilling his queer holiness book. It's not, he's literally dressed like a priest when he's doing this. So it's not like the Church of England didn't like strip him of any responsibility. So what exactly has the Church of England done to him? Maybe we'll find out.
So I'd like to transition and spend a few minutes talking about our cultural context, which is the Episcopal Church within the United States of America. There are some similarities, certainly. There are some distinct differences, right, between our lived experiences. And as I was
sound
trying
again.
to prepare for
I'm always sound with
about
these
what
people.
some of those differences are, to me, there are some interesting contrasts, right? It seems the UK is rated as a more progressive nation in terms of protection of LGBTQ rights, right? Access to healthcare, non-discrimination laws. If I understand correctly, throughout the UK, equal marriage is available legally, right?
Just.
Yeah, just. And yet, right, the Church of England, the official state church of England, continues to hold this more traditional opinion.
Yeah.
Right. And as you mentioned, is legally prohibited from participating in same-sex marriages, equal marriage.
Yeah, and we have the Church of England is a really weird organization, because being an established church, there are certain things that we have to do. And one of them is marry people. So if you live in my parish and you come to me and say, I want to get married to someone of the opposite sex, opposite gender, and you're not married before and your spouse is not still alive and various other bits and pieces, I have to marry you. You can be a Satanist, you can be an atheist,
So it seems to me then the Church of England also discriminates against divorced people. Is that what you're telling me? Because you just said you can't marry divorced people either. So does the Church of England hate divorced people too?
You can say you hate everything about the church and you think it should all be burnt down, but I still have to marry you. Because that's one of our responsibilities in the established church. It's one of the things that we do. Unless it's to someone of the opposite sex, unless it's someone of the same sex or gender, at which point we say, no, we can't legally. So, there's a wonderful thing on the Church of England website. It may have been taken down by now because I've gone on about it so much, but there used to be this thing on the Church of England website which says, unfortunately, we are unable to offer marriage to people of the same sex. And it's like, yeah, I know, because you chose this. And unfortunately, we're so sorry. And it's just an absurdity that's where we are. So our kind of cultural context in terms of how we relate to the state is different, which makes it all the more problematic that we are failing the queer people in our parishes. I did a group of facilitated comment. We have lots of wonderful words. I'm sure you have the same in the Episcopal Church for these for churchy events. And we had something called the facilitated shared conversations, which was essentially people who liked gay people, people who didn't like gay people, and people who'd never met gay people in a room together, genuinely. And we had people in that group who would say things like, well, it's not really an issue for us in our parish, because we don't have any LGBT people living there. Now, that's wrong on two grounds, because in the first instance, a parish in the United Kingdom means a geographical location. So yeah, you do, unless there's some very bizarre demographics going on. You definitely, I can be absolutely 100% sure you do. But even if they're talking about wrongly, their parish is the congregation, that probably means you do, but you don't know about it. Or you are so uninterested in their lives that none of them come through your door. And so the English situation in terms of parishes and in terms of the way that we are obliged to do certain things, I think really turns the spotlight on us. And we had an institutionally homophobic church crowning a king who is divorced to a woman who's divorced, whose former husband is still alive, and both of them are crowned by the Archbishop of Canterbury in Westminster Abbey. Something odd is going on.
You know, that's like a legit criticism to make. I mean, if his argument is like the Church of England should marry gay people because you all just did your most sacred of ceremonies with the coronation in which you crowned two divorcees. Although Charles kind of gets a bye because Diana died, and so Charles is allowed to get married again. Camilla is not allowed to get married again under the Church of England. This is why they had to have like a civil ceremony in which it was like a lot smaller, wasn't a big to-do, all that stuff. So, although I don't agree with this guy on like, larger issues, it is actually a pretty valid criticism to make, to be like, hey assholes, you guys just crowned two divorcees in your most sacred of all ceremonies. Don't tell me you can't bend the rules when you don't want to. That is a fair and valid criticism to make.
And it seems to me a really good example of why this is not actually about the sanctity of marriage, whatever that means, but actually it's about homophobia.
So I want to just very briefly try to contrast that with the experience of the Episcopal Church in the United States. And most of you know this history, I hope. It's not going to be new information to you.
Yes, and this is another point as well. The Church of England was, for those who don't know history, the Church of England was literally founded because Henry VIII wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry Anne Boleyn, because what Anne Boleyn did to Henry VIII was she like strung him along for years and refused to have sex with him until he married her. Which, I mean, good for Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn, like, really, she didn't just give it up. Her sister gave it up. Mary Boleyn gave up the goods to Henry VIII way too early. Anne Boleyn was like, no. I'm not giving him the goods. I'm not giving him what he wants. I'm going to make that asshole divorce his wife and marry me and make me the Queen of England. And then he's gonna get laid. So and the reason that Henry had to establish the Church of England is because the Pope told him no. He tried to get a divorce, he tried to get an annulment, he tried to get it approved through the previous measures, and the Pope told him no. And then Anne was like, "No, Henry, we still need to get married." And so then Henry decided to break from Rome and create the Church of England so that he could marry Anne Boleyn so he could finally get laid. The entire thing was to give the King of England a divorce. And then he later beheaded Anne Boleyn because she did not produce the son quickly enough that Henry desperately wanted. And he got tired and he moved on to Jane Seymour, who did produce him a son. And the rest is history.
So by Act of General Convention in 1976, the Episcopal Church said LGBTQ folks are children of God, which should not be a radical statement, right? Right. Canons for ordination were open in 1994, so we've been receiving LGBTQ priests since that time. We elected our first openly gay bishop in 2003, Bishop Gene Robinson. The church quickly complied with the country's decision to make equal marriage universal in 2015. And so in many cases, you know, it feels like as a church, we're a bit more progressive than what's happening in the Church of England.
Yeah.
Unless we get too self-righteous too soon, let's talk about what's happening in our country civically, right? Because in many ways, it feels to me like, and I hope you all agree, that we are moving backwards in terms of civil rights for LGBTQ folks. This year alone, right, this calendar year, over 491 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures. 491 since January. And while Virginia does have, as of 2020, an anti-discrimination protection in place in terms of housing, employment, and public access, right? Only those things. But
God does not want us to hear what this person is saying. God is like, don't listen to this. 12
anti-LGBTQ laws introduced in Virginia legislature this year. So lest we think we're safe, right? Lest we think that that progression is guaranteed. The civic position in our country is very different. And that contrast to me is interesting, right? Civically, you have a more progressive nation, but you have a church that's still very conservative on the traditional version of what marriage is. And in many ways, it seems like the US and the Episcopal Church have flipped that script, where we have a very progressive church, and yet nationally, civically, our safety is not protected, right? In fact, we have, just this year, we've had a number of states who have outlawed public drag performances, right? We have states who are actively making it impossible for trans folks to get affirming healthcare. Have states where it is no longer possible for an out queer trans person to participate in sports. So I wonder what you make of this contrast between our two nations and our two churches.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think it's been thus for some time. I mean, I think from a UK perspective, America has always been slightly concerning in terms of LGBTQ rights. And there was this sort of amazing time when it felt like that had changed, and it felt like America, the US, was changing into a country where this was no longer going to be the political football, or kicking the thing to be kicked around. And that seems to have, I think I agree. I think it's kind of gone back again. I think in the UK, trans people in particular are a political tool, or being used as a political tool in certain circles. But
side note, is anyone getting the sound in this is equally awful? But I think we're managing, we can at least understand them. But that's not what I was going to say. Is anyone getting like 8,000 emails a day from Republicans running for president asking for money? 'Cause, like, I can't take this shit anymore. I don't know what I did to deserve the fresh email hell that I have been, like, put into in, like, the Republican presidential campaign, but, like, I am literally getting, like, a notification every couple of minutes, like, fundraising, 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 fundraising. I'm just gonna start blocking them all. That's a good tip, Beth, because F these people. Seriously, what the hell? I'm not gonna give you money. I don't care how many times you ask. God.
But not yet in the majority of mainstream mainstream political debate. There's been no rowback, for example. Well, one can argue one way or the other about whether there's been rowback, but there's been no legislative attempt to row back. The Church of England institutionally is a tricky organization because there are very impressive power groups within it who are really good at getting elected to our General Synod and are therefore really good at preventing any change. And one of the weird things that happens in the Church of England is if you want to change anything, you have to have a 2/3 majority to do so, if it's a doctrinal issue, which marriage is. So that has meant that in the pews, there's probably more than 50%. Most of the surveys would suggest this. There's more than 50%, and in many cases, significantly more than 50% of people in favour of more LGBTQ inclusion, equal marriage, and the rest of it. But the institutional structures of the church remain very much kind of against. I think this speaks slightly to the irrelevance of the Church of England. So the Church of England is fast becoming, or perhaps has become, so irrelevant to public discourse that people were shocked that the Church of England didn't do same-sex marriages, didn't do equal marriages when the news came out in February, because people just couldn't believe that that was the case. And we have it. People come and approach us for same-sex equal marriages, and when we say no, they think we're massive homophobes individually, and then we're like, no, like as in we cannot legally do it, and people are surprised by that being the case. So I think, but I think it really damages our bishops' ability to speak out on other social issues, because
why should you
people certainly since
why should your bishops be speaking out on social issues? Why, like, is that really their job?
February, the number of times people then just say, yeah, but you're homophobic, so we're not interested. So don't start lecturing us about X, Y, and Z because you're homophobic. We found in the Church of England examples of institutional racism. So when we start telling other people about being less racist, the response is, well, you're institutionally racist. Your own reports tell us. So why are you talking to us? We've only had women bishops for less than 10 years. So when we start talking about women's rights and so on, people say, well, hang on, you've only got a few women. So we have basically been behind the curve each time and made the wrong decision for years each time before making the right decision. So the Church in England is not the beacon on the hill of hope that, frankly, as an Englishman, again, with the caveat, that the Episcopal Church appears to me to be. I mean, I think you folks have done extraordinary things. I mean, I don't want to make your heads too big, but I think you have done extraordinary things in the way that that marriage and so on are spoken about here, in the way that you treat each other, in the way that there is a wide recognition that the Episcopal Church is not perfect and that that's not being kept behind closed doors and whispered, but is being spoken out aloud and publicly. And I think those are really good things. I mean, there's a lot that needs to improve as well, like any church, but the fact that you exist and the fact that queer people exist in your midst as equals, albeit not absolute equals in certain circumstances and all the rest of it, but the fact that you don't turn to them and treat them as issues is remarkable for those of us in a church like the Church of England. And you are an extraordinary beacon of hope to us, because we really are in a different place. And we've been told for years that the Episcopal Church is terribly naughty. And that you've all done a terrible thing, and that because Gene Robinson used to be the word that people used to bring out The current word that people bring out in our debates about sexuality is polyamory.
Who is
That's the
Gene
usual word.
Robinson? Does anyone
One of
know?
our bishops just shouted it at the end of a speech in General Synod, which was just completely berserk. It was a very odd moment. But Gene Robinson used to be the word. People used to just say, Gene Robinson. And that would tell us, if you do that, you'll become like tech. And there's some of us who are like, yay! But there are a lot of people for whom that was the fear word. And now we find ourselves on the naughty step as well, because we've dared to offer prayers for God's blessing.
Oh, right,
for
right.
So we've got a lot to learn from you.
I knew
and we've
the
spent
name
a lot of
from
time with our
somewhere.
fingers in our ears. And I'm very grateful to tech for actually just getting on with it.
Thank you. We can take a brief amount of credit, right? And lest our heads get too big, we are not of one mind in agreement on how we live out those canons and those resolutions, right? And so that's one of the questions that I have for you as we think about the role of the Episcopal Church in the United States, in the broader Anglican communion in the world. What responsibility do we have to use our prophetic voice in allyship to the larger queer community beyond the boundaries of our nation?
Yeah. So there's one group of queer people who are, I think, almost constantly ignored, silenced, or kept on the shelf. And that's queer people in parts of the world where it's illegal, or where it's imprisonable, or where it's executable. And those places exist. And many of those places were parts of the British Empire, now parts of the English Commonwealth. And therefore many of them are Anglican Communion countries. Some of you will have known that the Archbishop of Uganda has used his Easter message this year to push for criminalization of homosexuality. Jesus Christ's resurrection from the dead got a line, and the remainder of the Easter message was about how bad homosexuals are, which doesn't seem necessarily like the original meaning of Easter. So we have issues in our own communion, big issues in our own communion, and it's so tempting, I think, to just say to hell with it, and we'll just do our own thing. And I can particularly understand that from the perspective of queer people, because being part of an institution that is calling for criminalization, for imprisonment of queer people, the Archbishop of Ghana a few years ago called for the imprisonment of people who happened to be LGBT and their supporters by supporting an opposition bill, which wasn't even being put forward by the government. It's continuing. There's a guy called, I think, Sam George, who's the MP in Ghana, who's determined to get this law through. These things are happening all the time, and it's really hard when you're a queer person to hear bishops and other people say how important it is to remain in communion, how important our unity is. It's really hard. But I do think the Episcopal Church has a responsibility to be the awkward guest at the communion table. That's what I think queer Christians are often doing in our own context, but I think it's what the Episcopal Church has been doing and has been called to do and is continuing to be called to do. You know, when you all got a slap on the wrist for ordaining Gene Robinson bishop, you know, I think one of the worst possible outcomes for you is, you know, you were asked not to attend committee meetings anymore. To which, even more disturbingly, Tech said, well, we'd actually quite like to just turn up to the committee meetings, actually. So it just goes to speak of our joint Anglican identity, which is committee meetings first, everything else last. But you were there, Tech was there, and that mattered, because it meant that however much people said to you, you're not real Anglicans, you're not part of the communion, we're the real remnant, we're what Anglicanism is and the rest of it, Tech was able to say, we're just as Anglican as you are. We're still here at the table. We're still holding on to this. We're still unwilling to have that name removed from us, because you can't. The thing is that the responsibility for that needs to be taken by non-queer people. And too often it's been queer people who end up standing up and making those statements. I have to say, I think the behavior of the tech bishops at Lambeth Conference was exemplary. I think that, I mean, I had a wonderful direct message on Twitter from a member of the tech bishops when the Archbishop of Canterbury or whoever it was had reintroduced the idea of Lambeth 110, which is a terrible resolution, which has no legal standing, which said that that we cannot in good conscience marry or bless same-sex relationships. And this bishop sent me a direct message saying, "What the hell is going on?" ? Which was interesting because it does show how much, in a sense, we have drifted from one another and understanding what's going on at the communion level, because it's so easy to become really kind of obsessed with our own church or caught up in our own echo chamber of our own church. But the tech bishops stood up, and most, if not all of them, marched with the LGBT march in Canterbury. Most, if not all of them, signed the letters. Most, if not all of them, said positive and loving things about queer people. That's what we need tech to be doing, because there are precious few places that are saying that in the Anglican Communion. And I do think, frankly, with the history of colonialism and everything else, those of us who are white that live in the West have a responsibility to stand up for queer people of color in the rest of the world who will continue to be treated appallingly by generally powerful men in powerful positions.
So I want to say, someone asked in the chat earlier if he was using the term queer as like a sexual term or like an identity term. I think this guy is a useful idiot. I don't think this guy really realizes what's going on. I think that's the impression. Oh, actually, Stephen B, super chat. Like, what perfect timing. Is he using the queer as a sexual term or a Marxist term? I don't think, excuse me, I don't think that he really realizes like what he's pushing. It seems to me that like he's probably gay. He's like, why can't I get married in the church? I'm a priest in the Church of England. Like, why couldn't I get married? Like, you know, it's like one of those like existential things. I don't think that he's using the term queer as a Marxist term, but this is why this is so insidious, that the queer Marxists have like hijacked the LGBT movement, because normal gay people don't understand what they're pushing. It's incredibly insidious. They're getting, I mean, this is the very definition of a useful idiot, right? They're getting these normal people that legitimately do just want fairness for gay people, just want them to be able to have the same rights as straight people, just want them to be treated no differently, just want to have normal lives. They're getting these people, and I've seen nothing from this guy yet that would indicate to me that he's like a Marxist, to be honest. But like, they're getting people like him to push this ideology because it's like they think it's what they need to do to be a good person. So that's my take on it. Professor Tem says, unfortunately, the Episcopal Church is full of useful idiots. They are majorly well-accepting old people who just want to be loving and accepting, and they are being duped. Yep, I think that's probably what it is. So he doesn't know what he's pushing. Now, that doesn't make it acceptable. We should probably be looking into the things that we're pushing before we write an effing book and go on a book tour about them. But I do also think that we need to understand that this guy is probably not the problem. He's pushing ideas that are the problem, but he himself is probably not the problem.
Yeah, so I have one more question for you before we move to audience Q&A. And let me just say, Episcopalians write good questions. You can see the amount of text on these cards, yeah. Right? So we're going to have fun unpacking a few of these together. So what I will offer you as we kind of close this portion is, despite the Episcopal Church's formal position on LGBTQ equality and the fact that we can receive the blessing of marriage within the church, it often feels to many of us, and I will include myself in us, right, that we are welcome to assimilate, right? And that often the cost of welcome is, this is how we do business. As long as you want to do business this way, you know, we're not going to throw you out.
Yeah.
And so I wonder since we haven't quite, in my opinion, received full participation, right? Full acknowledgement of the gifts that we offer. How do we start to identify and name the gifts of LGBTQI people in the church?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And it's something I hear from lots of folk, that marriage is part of the story, but not the conclusion to it. And I think that's true. It's true in England too. We talk about marriage all the time because marriage is the fight at the moment. But if people think that we're all going to shut up once we get blessings, well, that's not going to happen. But if they think we're going to shut up when we get marriage, that's also not going to happen, because the whole point is that there is something about what queer people bring to a church and what people of all different marginalized groups bring to a church, which can fundamentally reshape that church for the good. That doesn't mean you have to throw everything out and start again, but it means that you have to listen to the stories of what those people are bringing. So I think one of the things which we still haven't done well as a church is find the starting point at the Eucharistic table. So if you find the starting point at the Eucharistic table and you recognize that a place has already been set for all these people, it's not actually about you or me or anyone else saying that they are or are not welcome. There's that hymn, all are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place, which is always sung with great irony in English cathedrals. But it's not actually about us who's doing the welcoming. It's actually people have already had their place laid by the Lord. So that's game. That's like game, set, match. That probably, does that mean anything? Game, set, match in an American context? Maybe. Okay, that's a tennis phrase.
Some of the straight people get it.
Okay, fine. There we go. So, but it's over. So God's already laid the table, and so our starting point has to be: these people are equal. We, or whoever it is that we're looking at, are already full members of the body of Christ in corporate. So, and our belonging to the body of Christ, if we're not those people, requires them, and theirs requires us. And so our starting point is that they are and we are already all part of the same body. And then we go and look at what the church looks like. And so, for example, marriage. Again, I'm not going to get caught up obsessively with marriage, but for example, marriage, back to, is it between a man and a woman? Is that the key thing? Well, once we look at queer people in marriages, that starts to help us illumine in our minds what marriage actually is. What's going on here? What's the really important thing here? There's lots of people, lots of women in particular, who won't get married because of the historical meaning of marriage. You know, who giveth this woman to marry this man? Everyone says, oh, isn't that sweet? It's not really, if you think back to the history. That changes things. If you have a queer marriage where actually the two individuals within it are not in a power differential and it's not carrying some of that baggage of history and so on, that makes us think, well, maybe there's something about marriage that queer people can teach straight people. Maybe there is actually something really interesting and important here. And I think that's true about the whole of theology. So I think one of the major gifts of queer people is, and this is my next book, and you didn't know that, so I'm glad that I've given the opportunity to elbow it in. The next book I'm kind of writing, which is a very...
Bingo for Laura! Congratulations,
it's
Laura.
Almost written. Is called Queer Redemption. And I'm wanting to look at those things that we call important in the church, the Eucharist, the sacraments and the rest of it, and say, if our starting point is that queer people are full members of the body of Christ, what does that tell us about these things?
Uh-oh. Now he's ascended from saying queer people should be able to get married to how do we change church doctrine based on the assumption that queer people, and I'm using quotes because I don't agree with calling them queer, but I think he means gay. Queer people should be fully included. Now we're getting into, like, we're starting to ascend into, like, queer theology territory. Because, of course, to queer something means to push back against the norm of what it is. Now, maybe pushing back against the norm is good. Like I said, I don't actually see, if the government's going to be involved in marriage, I don't see anything wrong with having gay marriage because the government's already involved. And then conservatives will read saying, get the government out of marriage, except they're not going to campaign for that for straight marriage. They're only going to campaign for gay marriage. So that's another issue for another day, I suppose. But let's see where he's going with this is all I'm saying. I wouldn't liken what he's saying to just bake the cake. That's a different thing. the baking of the cake is a private business. The church is like a nonprofit. I mean, technically government subsidized since they don't have to pay taxes. Like, that's a little bit of like a different, that is a horse of a different color for me than a private business.
How does that,
And especially when we're talking about the Church of England, because the Church of England is the state religion in England. So it's a little bit different. He's speaking in an Episcopal church, but he comes from the Church of England, so it's a little bit different.
how does that refine our theology? Jesus does not do theology of the center, and Jesus also does not always bring people from the periphery into the center. That's our model of church, isn't it? We find people in the periphery and we bring them into the center, and then everyone becomes white, cis, hetero male. It's just that they don't know it yet. Like, that's often how we do church. The white, cis, hetero male is the normative still within most church communities, even those that are inclusive, affirming, welcoming, and so on. Jesus sticks out there. And I think one of the things that queer people really do is, and when we're willing to listen to them, is they speak at the margins about things which other people won't have noticed. And that for me is a wonderful, extraordinary gift for the church, but the church has to be willing. And the church includes you and me, the church includes all of us who have our own privileges of various different forms, that and the out groups may be different on different days of the week, depending on which orientation we're looking through. But we have to be willing to go out and listen. And it's only through listening that the whole organism changes. And with queer people, we haven't got there, even when we've got marriage, because we've just tried to bring people in rather than allow Jesus to go out.
That deserves to just sit for a minute. I hope you permit me a brief indulgence. We have about 4 minutes left, and I know, and I know that
you're meant to be keeping me to time. This is your fault,
I know
not mine.
Episcopalians want to end on time, but if you'll permit me, I'd like to go about maybe 10 minutes over so we can get to some of the audience questions. Is that all right? If you can't do that, you are free to get up and leave at any time. I'm not going to hold you here. So we have a couple of questions, Charlie, about that are all pointing to unity within the Anglican communion. That's certainly a buzzword that we hear a lot when we think about the communion at large. And so there's a question, and I'm just going to combine these two, right? So there's a question about how do we navigate the difference between the unity of the church and the communion and the pursuit of equal rights, right? And a second related question, which I'll just combine, is what's going to happen to the Anglican communion when the Church of England gives equal marriage?
Yeah. Okay, so the unity question, I think, is front and center of much of this conversation. You'll be delighted to know, or you may not be, that the book after the next one is genuinely called Unity, Anglicanism's Impossible Dream ? Because I think we speak about unity an awful lot, but I'm not sure that we actually know what we're talking about. Or indeed, we often are talking about unity, but we actually mean entirely different things to another person who's talking about unity. And so I think we actually need to do some work on what communion and unity looks like. For me, communion, there's a great report called the Hiroshima Report from the Reformed Anglican, I think it's the Reformed or the Lutheran Anglican Dialogue, which talks about koinonia, communion, as gift, and not as something that we own, not as something that we do ourselves, but it's given to us. So when we say we're out of communion with somebody, it's actually impossible to say that, because the communion which we share is what God gives us in the first place. So we're actually rejecting God when we say we're out of communion with somebody, which I think is quite a powerful idea, and I think right. So I think the kind of concept of unity in the context of Anglicanism needs fundamental thinking before we're able to work out what we mean by the Anglican Communion. The Anglican Communion has morphed into something it never was. There's now an office that runs it. There are the instruments of communion, including the Lambeth Conference. Very little of this has ever been agreed by anybody. It's just morphed into existence. We talk about resolutions from the Lambeth Conference as meaning something. They don't. They were just what a group of bishops who happened to be there on a certain day decided at that moment on that day was their opinion. So the whole nature of the Anglican Communion is in deep trouble. And if you'll indulge me for one moment, the Archbishop of Canterbury being the head of the Anglican Communion for me seems to be a post-colonial relic which needs to be immediately destroyed. It feels deeply uncomfortable to have a white man, generally a white Englishman, forgive me, Rowan Williams,
man.
but mostly who was Welsh, but mostly in a white Englishman, and it'd probably be a man. Thinking again about how we maneuver and work our way around these things, to be head of the Anglican Communion. And Archbishop of Canterbury, that seems really strange. We've tinkered with it in our General Synod. We've tinkered with it by saying that we'll have people from the Anglican Communion who can vote in the appointment of the next Archbishop of Canterbury. But then there was a rider which said, but don't worry, they won't have a majority, which to me basically means virtue signaling of the worst type. We'll have them in the room and we can keep the Anglican Communion happy, but don't worry, English people can really make the decision. It feels very uncomfortable. So I think that whole thing needs to be addressed in the context of unity. Very briefly on the English question of marriage, it ain't going to happen soon because our conservative evangelical colleagues in the Church of England are super well organized. And they're all saying they're going to walk out of the Church of England when we have blessings because it's going against the word of God. I'm willing to bet my house that doesn't happen. It's just not going to happen. They'll stay. They'll find theological reasons to stay in order to prevent us going any further. So it's not going to happen soon, but it will happen at some point. Who knows what will happen at that stage? But I would hope we would have reformed the communion to a stage where we're able to be a group of interdependent churches drawn together by not rules, but friendship. And if some of us, and like family ties, if some of us are unable to get on with each other, then maybe we need to no longer be together. I don't know, but we've got to move away from building unity on the back of queer people. It's just not good enough.
I'm going to quote the next person, since you've referenced the Archbishop of Canterbury. What do you make of the gymnastics of the Archbishop as he attempts to hold the Anglican Communion together?
I thought I'd get away without having a go at the Archbishop of Canterbury this evening.
I didn't ask the question.
No, it's not a job anyone in their right mind would want, surely. It is gymnastics, isn't it? And it's an absurdity. With the blessings, for example, the Archbishop of Canterbury said that he's just delighted that we now had blessings for same-sex couples, but that he wouldn't use them in the name of unity. Thinking that this would make a blind bit difference. I mean, essentially, like the moment that it was announced, a load of provinces declared they were in impaired communion with us, which is what we're expecting. It was actually fewer than we were expecting. And then the Archbishop of Canterbury went to the Anglican Consultative Council in Ghana and kind of put his hands up and said, oh, it wasn't me, mate, didn't do it. I'm not in charge of General Synod. I'm just a mere bishop and so on. And it was a very unedifying experience, which makes me wonder whether Lambeth Palace, the home of the Archbishop, are aware that the internet exists. Because all of us then read the Archbishop's comments, which were just, I'm afraid, disingenuous. But it's an impossible role as the leader of the Anglican Communion, which is what the Anglican Communion Office describes him as. I'm not sure that's correct, but that's what they describe him as. How do you do it? If you want to be English Archbishop and you've got to hold the communion together, and whatever that holding communion together means, because it's often just about ensuring that blackmail is kind of is allowed to continue. How do you do it? I don't think it's possible. And we have been essentially rudderless in the Church of England for years. We would have moved on this, I'm sure, if the Archbishop of Canterbury had not been the head of the Anglican Communion years ago, I think. But we haven't, and we can't. And whilst we remain in this current position, whoever becomes the next Archbishop of Canterbury, God help them, because we're just handing them the poison chalice from day one. They cannot get this right.
So I'd like to pivot just a little bit to the topic of the separation of church and state.
Did he? I was thinking about watching those interviews with Tucker today, and I really did want to see what Mike Pence, I know this is not the topic of the stream, but like this guy's actually being relatively mundane. We're going to finish watching it, but like, and I want to hear the Q&A, absolutely. But like, this guy's not saying anything that's like uber. This is definitely not queer theology from Toronto, that's for sure. But Pence imploded on stage with Tucker? Really? I don't know. I was thinking about watching those at some point. I don't know if I have the energy to do it today just because I'm like really not feeling great, but we'll see. Maybe. What did he say this to? That's none of my concern as president. What was he answering? I love that Beth thinks that Mike Pence is a limp noodle. This is why you're our queen, Beth.
Which is
just a small topic to end with.
It's an important topic to Americans. So I'll give you a general question and a specific question. So the general question is, what do you think the value of that is in the U.S. as contrasted to being, having an official state church in England? And a follow-up question to that, which I'll just go ahead and offer, is, do you think the supposed modernity of King Charles might have any influence on that relationship in the future?
Okay, I'll answer the second one first. No. So, so Charles is apolitical, and that includes the church. And there might be quiet conversations behind closed doors. I'm sure there are. The royal family is known to be pro-LGBT. Most of them are. Some of them aren't. Some of them are vicious homophobes, but most of them are pretty pro, and including all kinds of stories about the former queen, the late Queen Mother, who used to have loads and loads of queer people hanging around with her, and she was sort of, and it's never really been an issue in royal circles.
Really? I knew that
fucking
Queen Mother was a
I'm
bad
sure
guy.
It's very uncomfortable for the royal family to have an established church. That's the way it is, but there's no way that he will interfere, I don't think, or intervene. He's been very clear since becoming king that that's not his role. In terms of the church and state, I mean, there are some benefits to having an established church. One of them is the parish, that everyone is entitled to certain things. The thing is, we've just been slowly cutting back at all the things which make it good. So if you now can't get married in your parish church, if you're not straight, so that's cut away one of the goods. And there are some parishes that won't do funerals for people who don't sign up, they can't sign up because they're dead, but didn't sign up to a group of particular rules and regulations that their particular statement of faith. So I think when an established church is working well, it can do those kind of formal functions in a pretty impressive way. And often the Church of England's been able to do that in a way which has respected and honoured other faiths as well. It hasn't, there really are examples of really good practice in the Church of England. Whether that remains possible in an increasingly secularised society is questionable. And the fact that we have bishops in the House of Lords is definitely questionable. And I think their greatest threat at the moment is the position on equal marriage. That people have begun to, Ben Bradshaw, who's an MP, lovely, really serious Anglican, is beginning to make noises about this. It's time for the bishops to go if they're no longer able to reflect the nation, if they're no longer able to engage with these issues in the way which people need them to engage with. The US situation is different because, of course, the history is different. And also the US church is different because of the role of the Scottish Episcopal Church. And so it's not the Scottish Episcopal Church which sent bishops here to come and to ordain priests when we withdrew all of ours. The Scottish Episcopal Church is not the established Church of Scotland. It's a non-established church. The Church of Scotland, confusingly, is a Presbyterian or Calvinist church, which is the state church of Scotland. So when the Queen died, she died a Calvinist because she was in Scotland. But she had an Anglican funeral, a Church of England funeral, because
that's funny,
she came back across the border. It's all very strange. That's the world we live in. It's not, though. It's not real, though, is it? I sometimes wonder if any of this is real. But yeah, so I think there are benefits, and I do see us, frankly, over time becoming closer and closer to a non-established state. The problem with being an established church is there's this phrase, it makes a good boat to fish from. And so the reason that when I was talking about our conservative evangelicals remaining in the church, which is a kind of party term in the UK, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're either conservative or evangelical, but that seems to be the party term. The reason they stay in the Church of England is because it's the established church. So it's the place that you will be recognized as a minister of religion. You can conduct marriages according to law and all the rest of it. So it's a good place to be from. They keep saying that they're moving further and further out of communion. The one thing that conservative evangelicals seem willing to remain in communion with is the Church of England Pension Board.
Indeed. So we have a couple of questions, excuse me, that invite you to dig deeply into your theological underpinnings. So I'll phrase these as concisely as I can, right? So there's no simple way to ask a theological question, right? So this is, again, a two-part question. It's a three-part question. I don't know how to... Bear with me. This is hard, just to be honest. I'm just going to throw it to you. Do it the way you can. So where does the idea that the LGBTQ lived experience is sinful come from? Part two is a question about how that relates to the concept of hell or eternal punishment. And then the third question, which do what you will with any of it, right? How did we choose to prioritize those theologies, those doctrines, over Jesus' command that we love our neighbor as
This is actually a good question. I actually appreciate this being asked.
Yeah, just small questions there. So I'll take the final one first. Okay, cool, fine. So the final one first. I think there's a variety of reasons that LGBTQI people have been the target, in a sense of
Bot, you missed the days of Kate. I know it's not showing on the screen right now, but this is the special. What the fuck was Kate's last name? I wrote about Kate in my book. What was Kate's last name? God damn it. Hang on. I'm going to find Kate's last name real quick. Because, Bot, you missed out on the days of Kate. Hang on. Kate Slater! Yes, Kate Slater. Kate Slater with the honorary special emoji in the chat. Kate Slater was one of the first people to show up on multiple happy hours over and over and over and over and over again. She was an anti-racist trainer at the University of New Hampshire, and I think she was on one of like the earlier happy hours. And then every once in a while, every time we did a happy hour, Kate would just show up. She was like a Robin DiAngelo in training, and she would just show up over and over and over again. And like eventually I was like, what the fuck is with this Kate Slater woman? Because I mean, she was on like 3 or 4, like maybe even 5 happy hours. And so then I went on to Kate Slater's Instagram page, and I found this whole big thing about how she said that all white people were racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, after Kate Slater got her PhD at the University of New Hampshire, and then Kate Slater got a job in the student support wing of Brandeis University. So she was like an associate dean of like student services or student support or something like that at Brandeis University. And so she just kept showing up on happy hour. And then I went on to her Instagram page and I found her saying all white people are racist or something to that effect. And then I challenged Kate to a duel. Like, I emailed Kate challenging her to a duel. I was like, Kate, do you want to come on my channel? Do you want to come on my channel? We're just going to keep watching your stuff until you come on my channel. And then I took Kate's Instagram posts and I shared them all over Twitter. And then Kate Slater was on the front page of the Daily Mail in the UK for saying like all white people are racist as the assistant dean of student support at Brandeis University. You would have had so much fun going out. Maybe we should pay Kate Slater a visit. I haven't checked in with Kate Slater in probably about a year. We should check in with Kate. Bot, can you look into Kate Slater and see if she's still at Brandeis for us? That could be a fun activity. All right, let's keep going. That made me happy, Bot. That was a fun little reminiscence down memory lane. But Kate Slater really does have like a whole section in my book where I talk about how crazy Kate Slater is. I did. I made Kate Slater famous. You're welcome, Kate. We haven't forgotten. We'll be back. She even has an emoji. It's true. All right, let's keep going.
Or have this issue has become so important. One of them, which is simple scapegoating, thinking of René Girard and so on, the idea of scapegoating, that someone has to be the scapegoat for other people's discomfort or other people's feelings of self-loathing or whatever else it is. So I think that's one of the reasons I think we've become really good scapegoats for that. We're really weird about sex. We don't like talking about it. And one of the reasons we don't like talking about it is because we're kind of slightly disgusted by it, even in ourselves, the psychology, basic stuff. And therefore, queer people are the deviants, and we can put all the bad stuff that we don't like about ourselves and society on them. And therefore, so I think societally that's important. Martha Nussbaum, a great US philosopher, wrote a wonderful book about the politics and the philosophy of disgust in the context of same-sex marriage debate in the US. It's fantastic. It's really, for a philosophical book, it's really readable. And it's really worth a read. And so I think there's things about disgust and scapegoating and so on. And I think also, in some ways, that's why it affects people, even though they wouldn't want to admit that it affects them. The other reason is that this doesn't affect a large number of people. And as in personally, or certainly it didn't, because their kids were too scared to tell them, for example. So this doesn't impact people. So white straight men, this doesn't impact them. So therefore, it's a good group because it's not going to impact them. If you put all the sexual sins on someone else, then it's not you and it's not going to impact you. And also there's all kinds of questions around the fear of the feminine, the fear of the male being feminine, and all these kind of things. So there's a very, very detailed, long answer to that, but I think that's the kind of touching on why I think it has become important sociologically. Then kind of why it's become important theologically, or where did this all come from? The Victorians is partly the answer to that. Homosexuality as a concept is not a thing before the 19th century. So what we're talking about now as an idea is it does not exist before then, and nor does the word homosexual in the Bible. So the interweaving of cultural and sociological reasons for this being the key disgust factor, and the theology taking this on as a key element of particular censure of other people, I think is very sort of clearly interwoven. In recent years, I think, particularly in the Church of England, it's taken on, and I think probably here, and I think trans folk are bearing the brunt here, is because in my church, women and women's ordination was the issue over which to split the church. That was the defining issue that showed whether you were a real Christian or whether you were a sort of wet liberal.
Hang on, we got a super chat from our friend Rottweiler. Here we go. He's talking about queer as if we, the people who are gay, bi, lesbian, and by definition queer, which gives the evangelicons more ammunition to say we're part of the gay agenda too. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? This is the problem with, I mean, quite frankly, useful idiots on both sides trying to hijack things that they don't understand what it is. Like, the evangelicons are just, in my opinion, the evangelicons are just as big of a problem as the useful idiot Christians in the Church of England, in this guy's case, who are pushing this stuff. Like, he's a useful idiot pushing this agenda that he has no idea what he's pushing. The evangelicon Christians have no idea that what they're actually upset about is Marxism, because they just want to hate the gays, hate the gays, hate the gays, hate the gays, hate the gays. So it's like useful idiots on both sides. What is it? Clowns to my left, jokers to my right? Maybe, well, no, that sounds right, actually. Yeah. Indeed. Indeed, indeed.
And then it turned out that some of the real Christians actually were in favor of women's ordination, and some of them were, in fact, women who were ordained. And so therefore that didn't split the church. And so there had to be another issue, and there's another issue. And I think this is just the most recent issue. I don't know whether it will be the last, but it feels like it's going to be the most recent. So it's complicated. That's a very brief answer to an enormously important question.
Indeed. 3 more questions, and I'm going to ask all.
I'll be very quick in the answers now.
Yeah, well, good luck with this one. So if we have a shared historical understanding of what is sinful and what is not, right? And then we take certain things like homosexuality that was traditionally considered sinful, and we say that it is we no longer think of that as a sinful thing. Is this a slippery slope? Like, where is the line? Do we then find the point where greed is okay, where other terrible things are okay? How do we decide in terms of law and gospel?
Yeah, so we didn't always think homosexuality was a bad thing because we didn't think homosexuality was anything. And so we may have thought of kind of sex between men or sex between, well, we would have thought sex between men was a bad thing. Women really didn't get much of a look in and still don't really get much of a look in. There's fabulous examples of where you sit through long meetings of why this is all terrible and so on. And you say, well, what about lesbians? And the kind of conservative evangelicals go, what? So there's a lot here about male power and and what men do to other men and what men would allow other men to do to them and things that's important. So I think there has been a kind of concern through history, certainly theologically, about sex to some degree and to sex between men to some degree. The biblical texts, which we haven't gone into in great detail, are not enormously clear that it's actually, again, the male thing that's the important thing, or whether it's power and all that kind of stuff. We can talk about Leviticus till the cows come home. So firstly, we haven't always had that as our hang up. And also marriage hasn't always been our hang up. Like the idea that there's this magic Christian marriage which descended when Jesus ascended is just rubbish. That's just not the case. And the great majority of people were not getting married through the great majority of church history. And it was certainly not taught as a salvation issue that these people were going to go to hell because of it. But anyway, so I don't think it has been targeted necessarily as something that's bad through the whole of Christian history. But I think we are called to listen to quote a Roman Catholic Pope, to quote John the 23rd, who's a great Pope, if you're into that kind of thing. And he was talking about listening to the signs of the times or watching for the signs of the times. I think you watch for a sign, don't you, rather than listen to it. Watching for the signs of the times and listening to the spirit of the age. There's something about discerning what the spirit is telling us, given what we now know. So a lot of what we know about gay relationships, for example, is something that simply wasn't thought about or known about or understood in parts of the time when we're reading the church fathers or we're reading the scriptures or whatever. So we're trying to kind of, because we're determined that what the church has always decided was X, we're then reading back onto the scriptures or onto writers that is what they're talking about. And it's not at all clear that is the case. That's not to say we should throw everything out. I mean, I think there are really important questions for us to be talking about, like faithfulness, fidelity, intimacy, all these kind of things, and what that means for different people. And is there a Christian narrative of faithfulness and love? Well, I think there probably is. Is that contained solely within the doctrine of marriage? No, I don't think it is. I think that's really limiting. So it's not about binning everything. It's about, again, back to John the 23rd, the idea of ressourcement, returning to the sources, returning to the scriptures rather than our interpretations of or our historical understanding of things, and trying to understand what the scriptures are saying, what writers are saying, what theologians have been saying in their context, and aggiornamento, they're bringing up to date. And I think that is what we do as a church constantly and have always done. There's lots of things that the church, we used to burn witches, we used to drown them actually, didn't we? But anyway, however we used to murder them, we used to do it. And that was considered the kind of Christian thing to do. Like, we don't do that now. Like, and I don't, I mean, there may be, I mean, it's the US, probably there are some people who are like, yes, I think we should do that, but probably not in this congregation, not in this group. So it's a nonsense to suggest that just because we've had a kind of, we're willing to bring all of our faculties into our theological development and thinking that somehow, therefore, anything goes. That's never been the way the church does theology, and I don't think it's what we're trying to do now. That wasn't a short answer, was it?
No, but it was fantastic, so thank you. All right, so what can Episcopalians do to better advocate for LGBTQI folk?
Well, I think there's two parts to that, one of which is what can you better do in your own context? And in a sense, I'm not in your own context, and so I'm possibly not the right person to answer that question. I can speak from an English perspective of what helps us. What helps us is you supporting queer people, actually, and saying that they are full Christians. That was very powerful at Lambeth. Very powerful.
Queer people aren't Christians. Marxists aren't
the narrative
Christians.
That there is one Anglican perspective on this.
He doesn't
so I think
understand that,
Episcopalians
though.
just naming the truths that they name is very helpful on a global scale.
I mean, I will say this, and this will get me into trouble, but like, whatever. I don't think that God is male or female. I think that we are all a blend of masculine and feminine energies. Every single one of us. I think that there are people with penises, to use their language, that have very feminine energies. I think there are people with vaginas that have very masculine energies, because we're all a blend of both masculine and feminine. Whether or not you are like a biological man or a biological woman does not equate to you having the amount of masculine and or feminine energy that you have. And I think that this is provably true just by looking at people in the real world. Like, I am a woman, provably, like I have the right parts between the legs and everything. But I have very masculine energy. I just do. And there are men that absolutely have the parts and all that stuff that are very feminine. And it's just the way it goes. And then there are some women who are very feminine, and there are some men who are very masculine, and there are everyone in between. And so I think to say that, like, God is not like, God is making people in his image, God is not one gender or the other, we are all a blend of masculine and feminine. Like, these things work together, quite literally. That's the symbol for man, that's the symbol for woman. You guys can, you know, guess where you think those symbols come from. Man penetrative, woman receptive, you know? So I will agree on that part of it.
I think also listening to them, listening to us, well, I'm not American, but listening to queer people here. It's a process, this. The same is true of our legacies of colonialism and slavery and so on. This is a process. It doesn't get resolved. There's not a day when everything is resolved. And therefore everything's perfect and we can move on and we've solved the queer issue. That's not going to happen. It's about continuing to commit to attentive listening and commit to attentive listening when it's really uncomfortable. I think exposing, not sitting on your laurels, is that a phrase? Not resting on your laurels, yeah, as a church, but recognizing that if you start getting too comfortable, you probably need to make yourselves uncomfortable again. I think that's really important. And that's important across the board. Where I am in my parish in South London, we have a majority Black congregation, we're about 80%, possibly a little bit less, certainly 80% non-white British. We have a large group from South America and also a very large group from the Caribbean. Large group of people who themselves have come over to the UK in the 1950s and 60s to basically run the UK.
Bro, I don't believe there's a hell, and so if you're gonna shill this hellfire and brimstone and damnation bullshit, like, it's probably not gonna go over well here, because I personally don't believe there is a hell, and I absolutely do believe that two guys butt fucking, which, by the way, men have a prostate that is given to them from God, which is pleasurable only to men when accessed through, you know, the holiest of holies. Why would God give men a prostate and allow them to experience such pleasure from it that they can come purely through penetration if God didn't mean for them to be penetrated in that way? I'm just saying.
And then
either God did that or he didn't, but if he didn't want men to experience that, then why did he give them the parts in the first place?
Not that long ago, we had something called the Windrush scandal, and a load of people had because they hadn't got a stamp in their passport saying that they were entitled to British citizenship or to British residency, they were being sent. And the phrase was being sent back home. They weren't being sent back anywhere. They were being sent to a place that they'd never lived, or they'd lived when they were toddlers. They'd lived in the UK.
Women don't have a prostate.
Scandal. In our parish,
why do men only have a prostate?
With a large number of people. And we've done a lot of advocacy for our people of colour in our parish, a lot. Not just advocacy from sort of well-meaning white people kind of allying and trying to, but actually raising people up from our congregation, trying to raise people up from our congregation, trying to say this really, it matters, this is such an important justice issue. But it'd be very easy for us almost to say, well, we've kind of done that now. And I think our church is kind of okay, so we can move on to the next. And actually, we've got to recommit to re-listening on that, because there's still things that people say to me.
Correct.
Oh, what about X, Y, and Z? What I'm worried that this still happens, or that it's always white people doing this, or it's always black people doing this, or whatever. That seems unfair, and so on. If we're not, and often it's so easy for us, like particularly when we're holding a level of personal privilege, to be affronted by that, to feel like we're being personally attacked, as though like, but I am an anti-racist. I've worked really hard at this, and I always
Ew!
we need to
Don't
learn
ever
to drop
say you're
that.
an anti-racist,
And I think the same is true with queer Christians. That when queer Christians are saying we're hurting, or there's a problem, or there's this, that's not saying you're bad and we hate you. It's saying, please listen to me. Please listen to this. Please listen to us. And so I think that's what a good church looks like. I think that's what a healthy church looks like. One that's always willing to listen, to be open, and to be challenged by the realities in its midst. Yeah.
Thank you. That I had an unexpected emotional reaction to that response. One last question.
Okay, go on.
We'll wrap up, I promise.
I think that's more than 3, but we'll go with it.
I'm just counting the parts. Where does your hope and inspiration come from?
I think the answer is Jesus Christ. Not just because that's an easy and should be a popular answer in the church, but because there's something really attractive about the Christian message. I'm not doing all of this because I'm not a Christian. I'm not doing it all because I'm not interested in the church. I'm often accused of being an entryist. Like, I was a chorister in a cathedral for 6 years. I ain't no entryist. Like, I've done this. I've said the daily office or sung the daily office every day for 6 years. Then I went to school and did it for 5 more years. Then I've been in a college for 9 years. And like, come on now. What inspires me in a sense, or what gives me hope, is the fact that Christ has gone and done all of this before us. And that however much anybody tries to say that you're not a Christian, yes, I am. And in a sense, that's a pretty remarkable gift that we're all given. I think life is going to get better. I really do think it's going to get better. That's not optimism, it's hope. Because that's what we're promised. And maybe life's not going to get better individually for each of us. And there's a whole kind of conversation about the problem of evil and all the rest of it. But this is ultimately part of a narrative of redemption, which we're called to be part of. And it's pretty cool to be called to be part of that. So for me, that'll do.
So as we close this portion of the evening, I want to remind you of a few things. We have reception with refreshments in the parish hall. Please, if you're not finished, please join us. We're going to continue to have this conversation for a while.
Well, it looks like that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. I'm sorry that one wasn't as eventful as our queer theology one, but there is actually some sort of, that wasn't that bad. He's obviously pushing things that are he's obviously pushing critical theory and like queer Marxism, and like even said he was an anti-racist at some point. So this guy is very, 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 very lefty. But I don't think this guy is a true believer. I don't think this guy is I don't think he understands what he's pushing. I really don't. I think that this is probably someone who has worked with quote unquote marginalized communities. I think that, because priests do that, right? I would think they work with the underserved and the people that need help and the people that are going to the church looking for help and stuff like that. So I think that he's probably one of those guys who has seen people in dire straits, and he wants the world to be better. And because he self-identifies as queer, also kind of has some recognition of my church, the thing I've dedicated my life to, treats me differently than it treats you, than it treats them, than it treats that other guy. And that's not fair. I think I think it's important to acknowledge that when people are pushing this ideology, sometimes they're pushing it because it's the only solution that's been given to them. It's the only group that has reached out and said, we care about these problems too. And that's a problem, guys. That is a legitimate problem. When you hear conservatives talking about how, like, we shouldn't even worry about this stuff. Why are we even talking about it? Why are we like, what does it even matter? Like, this is the way it is. You got to go by the rules. Like, when you hear people talk about how, like, gay people just want to force their ideology on everyone else, and they want too much, and they want special rights, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not actually offering a solution to the very legitimate problems that are being brought up. Do you know who is offering a solution? The left. And they're saying these things are unfair, and maybe we should make them more fair. And then guys like this, who probably spends his days around people who maybe have not had the help and support they need, are like, you know what, that is unfair. Why is that the way it is? How can we do that better? And the only people that they're hearing solutions from are the left. They're not hearing solutions from the right. They're hearing solutions from the left. Really think about that. If all you're ever doing is saying, nope, 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 can't have the conversation. Nope, nope, no, 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 we're not changing the way we're doing things. No, 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 no. And then you have that as the conservative group. And then on the other side, you have people that are like, yeah, this is really unfair and we should maybe do something about that. Which side is going to win? The side that's going to win are the one offering solutions, not the one going, nope, 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 can't have this conversation. Nope, nope, sticking our fingers in our ear, can't do it. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. Liberation theologians have been infiltrating churches for over half a century, if not more, and contrary to what influencers said, they'll do it eventually for Muslims. There are woke Muslims already in some countries. I usually agree with everything you say, Rottweiler. I really do. I have a really hard time believing the woke are going to turn like Muslim countries, because they've got those countries locked down, bro. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe they should have that problem as well. But like, I just have a really I have a really hard time believing that we're going to be changing like Iran anytime soon, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Jeff says, what you're saying is why I think it's inevitable that the socialists will eventually win in America. Oh yeah, I agree, Jeff. I 100% agree. When you have one side saying, nope, 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 not going to do it, not going to do it. We're not going to change for anything. Don't change anything for anyone. Don't do it. And you have the other side saying, we want things to be better and fair and just for all. Of course, the side that wants things to, or is professing they want things to be better, is going to win. Of course they are. Anyway, guys, I apologize for maybe not being as spicy and as commentative as I usually am, but as I told you at the beginning, I am feeling a little bit under the weather today. I'm going to go chill out and relax now. But I will see you guys tomorrow at 6 p.m. for Socialism Saturday. Again, that is 6 p.m. Usually I go live at 5. Tomorrow we're going to be going live at 6. I will let you know what we're watching tomorrow. But that is all we have for right now, guys. Please do mount the like button on the way out the door. Hang on. I just watched you a video on King Charles. Did you see the clip of 46 nibbling? I heard about this clip. I heard about it, Mustard Seed. I haven't seen it yet, but I did hear about it, and I will look into it. All right, guys. I will see you tomorrow for Socialism Saturday. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.